And young women often hear, oh, you don't want to coach. It's too time-consuming. Shouldn't you be thinking about starting a family? And one that I just heard today, women can't coach D1. They should only coach D2 and 3 because if you coach at the D1 level, you can't have a family. I'm tired of these. I'm sick and tired of going around the country and hearing these. This is on us to start controlling our narrative together. How many of you, stand up if you've heard one of these? Stand up. Exactly. That's my point. Okay, sit back down. Women coaches exist in a system. And if you've heard me give talks before, you've seen this system. And many of those narratives that I talked about are societal. They're the hardest ones to change. Those societal narratives also drive organizational policies, norms, and behaviors that also influence the experiences of women coaches. And then the people that you surround yourself with at the interpersonal level, athletes, coaches, networks, etc., also influence the individual coach's experience. So changing the narrative and changing the culture of sport for women to feel valued and supported can happen from the top down. But that takes time. It happens slowly, over time, with lots of collective energy, and there are people that are working to make that happen. But I want to kind of flip this for us. So if you have ever experienced anything in any one of these boxes at any point in your life or career, stand up. When anyone in a marginalized population, in this instance women, but it could be women of color, it could be lesbian women, it could be lesbian women of color, women in the minority are more likely to experience negative occupational outcomes. They feel scrutinized. They have to perform better than their male colleagues. They feel stress, anxiety, hostility. They're more likely to burn out. They're more likely to want to quit, and sometimes they do quit. If you have ever felt any of these on the slide, maybe not now, but at some point in your coaching career, stand up. And for the new coaches in the room, if you're like, oh my God, who invited her up there? Okay. You can sit down. I want you to locate yourself in those narratives, that system, the consequences, and I also want us to be aware that despite the fact that women exist in that system and are underrepresented at every level in nearly every sport, is that women get blamed for the lack of women in coaching. The people with the least power in the system get blamed for the lack of women, and when this happens, the people in power don't have to change the culture. They don't have to interrogate the culture. That sometimes makes women feel unsupported, unsafe, and not valued. We can change that, and we have to start working together to control these narratives because other people are telling our stories for us. So in this system then, change can happen from the bottom up, and I want us to start doing that now. That we have control over. And there are other marginalized groups right now in the US that have been traditionally oppressed and marginalized and voices haven't been heard that are controlling the narrative and creating cultural change. It is possible, whether it's about police brutality or racism or sexual harassment, sexual violence, or women's rights. These are really good examples for us together as women coaches to start thinking about how we can control our narrative together. And I often get the question, well, why should we really care if there's women coaching? And I would like to put forward as part of our narrative is that when women are in the workplace and are not minorities, it's good for everybody. It's good for the women, it's good for the men, it's good for the athletes, it's good for the workplace. It's just plain good. So this also has to become part of the narrative, and this also becomes a matter of talent acquisition and retention, is that when women see other women coaching, that's a place we want to be. And some of you are in workplaces where you may have a majority of women, and that's a very different culture than if you are the only woman. If we want to change the culture, we have to change our stories. And we're going to start right now. I am going to give you some strategies in just a minute, but what I want you to think about is this idea of she can coach. I want you to turn to a neighbor in just 30 seconds. What does this mean to you? What does she can coach mean to you? Just 30 seconds each. Go. Okay, so I would like to invite you, because I don't have time to go to everybody, is to tweet it, either at Tucker Center, at Dr. Sports Psych, at Go Coaches, and say, she can coach means to me, and just tweet it out. Because I really am interested to hear what you have to say. For me, she can coach is about celebrating the women that do coach. It's about supporting each other. It's about creating a common language that we can use to empower women coaches. It's a slogan we can use to push for social change, and it's also something we can use to motivate and inspire coaches and women and young girls that want to coach. This is also part of our narrative. We need to know that we matter and that we are valued, and that everything on this slide is backed up by data. This is not me sitting in my office making up reasons why women coach matter. This is from, although I could, and I do think about this quite a bit, but this is our narrative. You have to be able to articulate to others, this is why women coaches matter. And be really clear. You don't have to be combative or hostile, just like, this is why it matters. You do matter. Same-sex role models matter. So this is part of the new narrative. This is not going to be our narrative anymore, the blame the women narratives. How many of you, out of all these narratives about why we don't have enough women coaches, just raise your hand. How many have heard any of these before? Exactly. Okay. Now, now here's the thing at the Tucker Center we feel really strongly about. Some of these narratives might actually be true, but I want to see the data. So let's see the data that either says, yep, that one's true, or nope, that one's not true. But until we have the data to refute all of these, I don't think it's in our best interest to perpetuate this. So I'm going to give this the yuck face. Don't ask me how I found that picture. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 new narratives. And if you have other ones other than 5, I'm all ears, send them to me. This is our story. This is just my thinking about this. I need everybody to be thinking how we can change our narrative. Narrative number 1, women don't apply. How many have heard this? Raise your hand. Okay. All right, here's a new way to frame it. Women actually do apply, they just don't apply in as great a numbers as men. That's different. Women do apply. So if you have 50 male applicants and 5 female applicants, you can't say women don't apply. Another way is that remember that women decide to apply not in a vacuum. They choose to apply because of what they see within the system and the culture that they are in. The other way is this idea of women don't apply. Now, I've had lots of conversations with athletic directors, and especially here at Minnesota or other Power 5 college athletic directors around the country. And I don't know, we just hired a new women's basketball coach. Let's hear it for Lindsay. Woo! And this is no disrespect to Mark Coyle or Julie Manning or the University of Minnesota. I'm using this as an example. Do you think Lindsay Whalen applied for her job? Was Mark Coyle sitting behind his desk Googling monster.com for a new head coach? No. So when we think about applying, we really need to be thinking about what is the pathway and how do people get jobs? It's about networking, and it's about who you know. It's very rarely about randomly applying to something and getting a job. That's a very different narrative than women don't apply. Maybe it's that women need to have a stronger network. That's part of the narrative. All right, narrative number 2. Women aren't as interested in coaching as men. Well, I see about 350 women in here that look pretty interested in coaching. Why do we have to make that comparison? And is that fair? So here's a new way to frame it. Interest is driven by opportunity. And what we know from the data is that 42% of all college head coaches are women for women's teams, so less than half. 23% of all college coaches, men and women's teams, are women, and 2% of women coach men. So if we aren't interested, but if you flip it and say interest is driven by opportunity, there's not a lot of opportunity. That's part of the culture. The other thing, and you hear this a lot, you can't be what you can't see. So how can you be a female coach when you don't see anybody that looks like you? Just because women don't apply, and women don't apply in the same numbers of men, doesn't mean they're not interested. Maybe we need to actively recruit and invite women to apply and cultivate that relationship. So as coaches, those of you who get to recruit players to teams, you build relationships, you cultivate them to come and play in your team. It's the same thing with getting women to apply to coaching positions. Last thing, I know and I can see women are interested in coaching. And Matea, who you heard from throughout the day, in her master's thesis, in her sample of collegiate Division I basketball players and a sample of 250, 40% of those women went into coaching. That's interest. So I know women are interested in coaching. Blame narrative number 3. Women don't want to move their families for a new job. Who's heard this one? Okay? That may be true. That may be true. I want to see the data. I want to see it. And so a new narrative, because I haven't seen any empirical data, and this is not to refute people's perceptions and experiences and boots on the ground. But is this also true for men? Are men more or less likely to move their families? I mean, disrupting families is not easy for any parent or any family. So I would like to see the narrative being talked about parent coaches and not blaming women for not wanting to move. Because what's good for women is good for everybody. So when we talk about this, how do we make this friendly for everybody in terms of a new narrative, I think that's important. Number 4, women can't coach and have a family. How many people have heard this one? I know you're like, okay, I got you, Dr. LaVoi. You're teeing me up here. How many people in this room coach and have children? Stand up. Stand up. Wait a minute. I thought women can't coach and have a family. You guys are my data. It's possible, okay? We know it's possible. And so the new narrative is women actually do coach and are coaching and can balance both, just like men. And many women coaches, based on the data, report enrichment, a work-family enrichment by coaching and having a family. That's a different narrative that women can't coach and have a family, because the more we say that, the young women in the room start thinking that's actually true and internalize it and get out, or don't actually enter coaching to begin with. Number 5, this is one I really gets me lately. Female athletes want a male coach. How many have heard this one? Okay? That's probably true. You know why they want a male coach? Because that's all they've ever had. New narrative. This is now becoming a teachable moment. So the next time that somebody says, well, you know, female athletes want a male coach, this is your opportunity to say, actually, that statement is based on a lot of sexism and gender bias. And we have a handout on the Tucker Center website that has 5 ways that you can have a conversation about this statement with female athletes. And I think as coaches of women, many of you coach women, is that when your athletes say this, they are perpetuating the problem. We need to stop and teach them, look, team, pretty soon you're going to be in the workforce. And what happens if your colleague said, well, I'd like a male boss? How do you think you'd feel? So we need to educate each other, and we need to coach up and coach down that why are female athletes saying this? When they say they want a male coach, there's a lot that underlies that. So I'd invite you to check that out. So here's the new narrative. I want us to embrace this. Coaching is awesome. Yes, I know it's hard work, but it's one of the most rewarding, difference-making professions you can have. And you are here because you care, and you want to make a difference, and you are making a difference, and that is amazing. So I want you to, here's your homework. There's a lot of reasons why coaching can be great. Role model, make a difference, giving back, you're passionate about the sport, you like to teach, you like to interact with young people. In the next 2 weeks, and I'm gonna quote Coach Teeter, you have 2 weeks to talk to 2 female athletes that you know and have the conversation with them, because everybody has those on their team. Hey, have you ever thought about coaching? I think you'd really be a good coach. How many people in this room got into coaching because someone in your life said something like that to you? Like, hey, I think you'd be a good coach. That's the power that you have as a coach to just make the invitation. I think you'd be good. You love the sport? You want to give back? You want to stay involved? Think about it. Okay? So that's mini homework. And the other thing I want us to do is really start embracing this idea of she can coach, or maybe we can come up with a different one. But I think that this is sticky for all the reasons that you talked about and all the reasons I talked about. And maybe even that female athlete that you wanted to invite to coach, maybe you buy her one of these wristbands and give it to her when you have that conversation. Greta's laughing. Shameless plug, Doc, shameless. Hey, another bad narrative about women is that we're not good marketers and that we don't want to promote ourselves. So I'm trying to model this for you all. All right. The other thing that you can do that's super concrete is when you see stories in the media about women coaches, tweet it, click on it, share it, and hashtag it with She Can Coach. That generates awareness every time. And I'm always doing this through the Tucker Center, so you can retweet ours if you want. This generates social media savvy and awareness. So to wrap up here, here's some new narratives along with these coach pictures that we saw earlier. Women can and do coach at every level and are successful. Women can and do coach boys and men. Black women are great coaches and leaders. Women in their 50s and beyond are in their coaching prime. They have great wisdom and are highly relevant. Women with kids are just as committed as their male colleagues with kids. Being an out lesbian shows athletes, their parents, and the community that being your authentic self matters and takes courage. Paralympian gold medalists make great coaches. And those of you who know Steph Wheeler know that is in fact true. And for young coaches, know that most all careers are time-consuming. And many working moms find enrichment in balancing work and life. Those are very different narratives than what I started with. And how we frame our experiences together matters. We have control over that together. We have to hold each other accountable for it. And so in conclusion, I want you to recognize when you hear damaging, blaming, unproductive narratives. Employ and create new counter-narratives so we can control our stories, because stories change the culture. Use teachable moments. There are a lot of them. That's coaching. Coaching is basically a series of teachable moments, is it not? Here's another one, a way you can do that. Join in the She Can Coach movement any way you want, whether it's through inviting other girls and women to think about the profession or using the hashtag on social media. Two really concrete things that you can do. So in conclusion, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. I'm inviting you to help us, all of us together, change our stories so we can change the culture of sport so all women coaches can feel valued, safe, and supported. Thank you.